All right, ready to get started? Cool. How was homework? Mostly nods. Good, good. Feel like you can make React components now? At least ones that just have markup in them. That's good. Everybody push their changes to GitHub? A lot of nods. Good. So just remember, I know you found this out Friday. Probably should have told you earlier. Davey and I do spend Fridays while you all are doing whatever else you do with extern stuff, checking over your GitHubs. So both the quantity and quality of work. So just make sure, especially when it gets close to Friday, they've got all your homework for the week pushed up. It's much easier to do it as you go along. So definitely try to do that. But yeah, we take...
Keep the swear words in your commit messages to the minimum. Less a problem in the afternoon than, oh no, what's that? It's already told you.
Yeah, appropriate commit messages, at least mostly appropriate. All right, so let's go over some of the homework. So where we left off, we had just made the header component, right? Which looks pretty good. What else in the header looks like something that is worth breaking out into a component? Navigation, right? Because that could appear lots of places, so that's probably a good idea. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make a new file. navlinks.js. And what do I need to do first? Yeah, gotta have React to use React. Got that. What do I do next? Create the class for our component. And we're just going to call it navlinks. And what's the name of the method I need to have? Render. So just to make sure we get everything wired up correctly, just put a little placeholder return element for now. What's the last thing I need to do in this file before we can use it? Export. All right, that should work. And then to use it here, import navlinks from, and remember we have to use the relative path. Why do we need to use the relative path? Anybody remember? Yes. I'm sure that's what you were going to say, right? Yeah. If I don't give it any prefix like we did with React, by default it's going to look in node modules. By giving it a relative path, it knows exactly which specifically I'm looking for. And then we can just add it to our markup here and see if that renders. Yeah, it did. Okay. So now that we know that works, we can move the markup over to there. So we'll just cut this part of it out. And we can replace that here. Make sure that still looks the way it's supposed to. Awesome, it does. What's the last thing we need to do? Move the markup. What else makes it look the way it does? Yeah, so we can make a style sheet for it. So we can go into our header CSS and see where probably everything prefixed with navlinks is what we're looking for, right? So not too much stuff. Looks like the rest of that all applies to the rest of the header. We can cut that out. Drop it in here. And then we just need to make sure that we can access it by importing it. Easy enough. And it still looks good. So, mission accomplished. Is there anything about this markup for the nav links that looks maybe a bit repetitious? Yeah. Yeah. So these three links are exactly the same other than just the text that's rendered in here. So you don't always have to do this, but we're going to do it just for practice. But a lot of times when you see repetition of the exact same markup over and over, it's a good time to pass in some props and then just map over them to create multiple instances of the same markup. So let's go back to header. And we'll just make an array and pass in. So what do we need? Like what kind of data are these? Like are they numbers or strings? Yeah, so we can just make an array of strings. Home, about, and login's the third one, right? And then how do we pass it in as props? It's going to go in nav links, right? How do I actually put it in there? Just looks kind of like an attribute, right? So we can just say links equals links. So remember, this name is what the property on props is going to be inside the component. This is what I'm actually passing in. So this links corresponds to this, and links is what it's going to be called on props inside nav links. So if we have an array of things, what method do we normally use to do something to each item in the array? Map, right? So we can get rid of this. Well, let's not get rid of it yet. We can use curly braces to say, hey, we're going to do some JavaScript now. How do I access the links property? Yep, this.props.links. So now I've got access to that, and then we're just going to map over it. And so each item is just going to be an individual link, right? And we can just do, since we can one-line this, we'll just copy-paste this in here. But then instead of home, what do I say? That's the part we're going to put in dynamically, right? So what's link right now? Remember, our array is here. So the first time through, what's link? Home, right? And that's what I want to appear here, right? So we just need to say curly braces, doing some JavaScript, and say link, right? Let's see what happens. Now I have 6 links because I didn't take the other ones out. But that looks about right, right? So now we can get rid of these. And now our markup looks like that. Now you notice there was a brief flash of a warning over here. Anybody running into this while you were doing your homework? Did you fix it or just ignore it? Fair enough. Somebody in the front row that can read that. What does that say? Clayton, you want to read that for us?
Warning, each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. Check the render method of that.
Cool. So each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. So anytime you are creating multiple things through an iterator like map, it needs some way to keep track of uniquely which one is which. So it's not going to break if you don't do that. The reason that you need that is for React's own when to re-render things. Change something on that input props, right now it would re-render all 3 links, which is not a huge deal right now because it's not a huge amount of stuff to render. But when you're talking about a very complex app, it could be re-rendering a lot of things. If there's, I mean, we worked with ones where there's literally thousands of iterations of a thing. If we give each one a specific unique key, then it can keep track of each one and only render the one that's changed. So that's part of where that efficiency of React comes in, is knowing specifically which things have changed and only re-rendering those things. So that's why it'll give you a warning. It won't stop you from doing it because nothing's broken, but it's saying, hey, you really should put some sort of unique identifier on here so that way we can keep track of things better. So what's something, I mean, the links themselves are unique. Is there any other property of an array unique that we could use as a key? Yeah, index would be fine. So right now we're just using the first argument to map, which is the item itself, but we can easily pass the index also. And then all we have to say is give it a key property and pass it that index. And so now if we save that, that warning should go away because now each of our items in that array has a unique key. Now, most of the time you won't be using array index for this. Usually when you're iterating over stuff, it's stuff you got from your backend server. It's just in this particular app, we don't have a backend server. But usually when you get items from a backend server, they'll already have a unique ID associated with them, so you would actually use that ID. But in absence of that, we can use the index as kind of a stand-in for that. Probably a good time for a commit. Make nav links. Yeah, that's probably good. Make nav links component. All right, got that. So we could break some more things out on the header, but honestly, the rest of it's pretty much just markup. No real repetition or anything, so probably not a real good reason, compelling reason to do that. So let's move on to, so now we got all this componentized. For our next parts, we talked about yesterday doing like the article. We mentioned the ad was a thing. This part, really, if you look at our markup, we have our header, and then a lot of, all 3 of those items are kind of in this main section. So let's break it out into a main component first. That'll act as kind of like a container for those other 3 things. So let's go ahead and do, and I do want to emphasize, just because I did it this way does not mean if you didn't do it the exact same way that that's wrong in any way. You could have 2 people with 10 years of experience do things differently if they were to componentize this thing. So I'm just showing you a way to do it, and we'll learn some new things along the way. But don't feel like if you did it differently that it's in any way bad. All right, so we got that in there. Let's go ahead and make a new file. I'm going to do our import of React and component. And then make our class. Don't forget to export. And of course, we need our render method. And let's see if that works. Sure does. There we go. So now that we've done that, we can safely move all of this markup over there. So everything in between the main tags. Oh, that's a lot nicer. Can actually see what's going on in here. All right. There we go. Everything looks the way it did before. We moved everything out of our app.js into this main component. Now we should probably move the styles over too, right? Probably be a good idea. And so that's going to be a good chunk. So articles included in that, right? The avatar. Let's see, what else? The ad definitely is. The other article links, that's part of it. Basically everything down to the footer, right? We can move all that over here. And then we just need to import that. Oh, I called it main.js. Why did I do that? That was a bad idea. I'm going to rename that. And then I'm also going to need to change what I imported it as. There we go. Make sure that still works. App.js line 12. Oh, I did call it main. That's silly. All right. Got that. And then we just need to import our style sheet. Nailed it. Ship it. All right. So we got everything in here. Like we said, we probably want to break it up further. Which one do you want to do first? Yes, I can. Yeah, it's probably a good time to commit anyway. Do that. Push. Why does it not have that? I think it's lying. There you go. Mm-hmm. All right, which one do you want to do next? Clayton, what do you think? Article. Makes sense to me. So that's probably going to be everything starting with this thing that has a class of article. So we'll put in that. We know we're going to need to import it, right? Even if we haven't made it just yet. And then let's go ahead and make that file. Step one. Alex.
Put in that import statement for React.
Yes, and I like your enthusiasm. Step two. Let's see. Ryan.
Create a class.
Sounds legit. Export it. Render function. Return some JSX. Let's see if we did it all right on the first try. Sure did. All right. Let's go ahead and pull that markup out of main content. Whoa, too far. So everything up to the aside. Nice. Everything looks the same. Let's go ahead and get the articles its own CSS. That's going to be everything down to the add, probably, right? So we got the article links are in there. There we go. And then we'll get that style sheet imported. And everything looks good. Good time for a commit. It's always good to be able to spell when you do a commit. All right. Next component we should do. I promise we just have 2 more boring components and then we get to more fun stuff. You want to do the add next? Sure. So we can make one called add. Import it, make the file, import React, make the class, export it. You know what? I'm going to go crazy. Not even going to try a basic one first. We're just going to move it over. If we don't make it, tell my wife and kids I love them. Except I don't have any, so. Oh, look at that. It still works. That's amazing. Let's get the CSS over there. So let's see. Aside is part of that. Obviously, all the stuff with the add class. There we go. And let's import that style sheet. And everything should work fine. Okay, back to interesting stuff. Oh, wait, I should commit the boring stuff first. I'll push that. All right. So the only thing we got left in the main content is these links, right? That we haven't already componentized. And that was also, what was that, super mega bonus credit? I don't remember. It was something really cool though. Was to do a map over that. So did anybody do that successfully? You did? Cool. Anybody try it? Anybody else try it? Tried it? Didn't make it? All right, how'd you do it?
Well, I originally componentized all those,
Uh-huh.
and then before trying this, and then when I mapped them over, I just created an array with their names, and I would just render them and as the name and using the map.
Okay. So the names were unique in the Okay. We're going to try it a slightly different way, but the basic idea is we need an array of something, right? Something with the information that each of them needs to be able to render correctly. So when you look at a single one of these, what in here is unique compared to the other ones? Did you want to say something? You looked like you wanted to tell me something unique. Yes. The picture, yeah. Image source. What else? Yeah. Yeah, I always forget about the alt because it's way over here. But yes, that is unique. And then the P element, right? So 3 things. So if we need to keep track of 3 different things, what sort of data structure should we use? Think about mega raster when we stored in the students array. What kind of thing did we use to store it? Key values, meaning they were objects, right? So if we've got an array of objects, that should probably work. Let's see. So I typed these all out in the first class, and that took a long time. So I'm just going to copy paste. Okay. So we've got an array of objects, right? And again, normally you would not have this stuff hard-coded. This is stuff that your backend server would return to you. But the point is you need to know what the shape of the objects look like, so that way you can pass them in as props and render links appropriately. Now you will notice I did forget the alt, so we do need to add that in here. I think that was orcs. What was this one? I think it was a mountain. Anybody know what the alt does? Did we explain that before? Yeah. Yep. So if the image doesn't show up, it'll show that text. And then also for the visually impaired that use screen readers, obviously a screen reader can't describe an image to them. So be nice to those people and always put alt on your images, so that way they have an idea of what they are looking at. All right, so now we got an array of objects. So what we need to do is make a component for our other articles, right? So we can just call it that if we want. And then what do we need to pass it so it knows how to render stuff? We can just pass it the whole array, right? That works. And we'll just call it links. That'll be shorter, so I don't have to type that so many times. All right. So basically, we should be able to get rid of all this and have our other articles component map over that array we gave it and render 4 different things, or really however many things we give it. So let's make that happen. So first we're going to need to import it. Make the file. Go ahead and make our class. And export it. Get a render method in here. There we go. All right. So that's here. Now I don't need, well, let's go ahead and just move this over for now. So we'll cut that out of there. So the nice thing when you break things into components, not only does it make them reusable, but also just kind of makes it easier to see like what your markup actually is. When you looked at that wall of markup when we were looking at the static HTML site, it's kind of hard to see like what goes where and really what the purpose of the page is. But now you can kind of see, okay, I've got an article, I've got an ad, and then I've got some other articles with links on them. Okay, that makes sense. If I need to see specifically what that markup looks like, I can go drill down further into the components. But makes it a lot more manageable. So we'll go ahead and paste this in here. And that's all working fine. But we are not, right now we're just still rendering them. So how do I get them to render dynamically? Anyone have thoughts? We did something similar already with the nav links, right? Yep, use a map. So we could do, and how do I access that array? What do we pass it in as? Well, so that's the variable we passed in. What's it going to be called inside our links, right? And can I just say links? Nope. What is it? This .props.links, right? So can do link. Oh, not like that. There we go. Why does it not like that? Oh, wait. Never mind. That needs to go. Everything has to be in a single element, right? So I had it outside, so it was trying to return multiple elements, and it did not like that. So everything goes in this outer div. All right, so I'm going to start mapping over each link, and each link is going to be one of these objects, right? So we're going to return the markup for a link, which is going to be one of these, right? So I can just paste that in here. Just realize this H2 needs to go above that, right? Otherwise, we'll have our headline below the actual links. All right. So it's saying for the array of objects that we passed in as this.props.link, we're going to map over that, take each link object, and return a div with an A tag inside of it, right? So what do I need to change on this? What parts do I need to change to make that work? Which parts are the dynamic parts? Yeah. Yep. So the source, if I don't use that string, what do I use instead? What's the object look like? Yep, link.image URL. And very similar with the alt, you can just use link.alt. And then we can do, what do we call it? I don't even remember. Caption. That makes sense. Let's see what that does. Sweet. So now I've got 2 copies basically. Well, 1 2/3 of a copy, since I actually removed that. But yeah, so now we don't need the rest of this anymore, right? We can just get rid of that. Ta-da! So you can see how, especially when your markup gets a little bit more complicated, using a map can really reduce the amount of space that takes up and the amount you have to type. So this is much shorter than having all 4 of those hard-coded. Let's see here. Any questions about that so far? All right, now you notice, I saw it flash up here briefly, so we have that same issue where we haven't assigned a key prop to this. So we're using an iterator. So ideally we want each of these items to have a key. So we'll need to do that at some point. But first, I do want to show you kind of a new concept here. So one thing that you can do, and really most of this, we wanted practice making actual full React components, so we just had you do it that way. When you have a piece of React like this, where does it have any of its own state? Does it need to keep track of anything? No. Like all it's doing is rendering a bit of UI and some props, right? So it doesn't really need state or anything like that. So there's an even simpler way than actually instantiating a class. You can do what's called a stateless functional component. So you can just literally say function, we'll just call it article link, and have it accept props as an argument. And all it does is just return some UI. And so what we can do is take this, put it in here. This can be done in a separate file, or in this case, this is the only place this is going to get used, so I'm just putting it in here. Then we don't need any of this extra stuff, because now we can one-line it. And we can just say, pass the link in as a prop. And then, since we're passing props in directly, it's not this.props anymore, it's just props. So you just need to add that to each of these. So it should still work the same, and it does. But this is just a really nice way, if you have a piece of the UI that you want to componentize, and it doesn't in any way need to track its own state, you can just literally just make a function that returns a chunk of it. You can still pass it props, it can still do that sort of thing. It can even do a bit of activity. If you passed a prop in that was a function, it could still call that function. But then it lets your markup read like, hey, for this.props.links, for each of those, make me an article link. And then if I need to know what that specifically looks like, then I can find that. But kind of makes sense? Cool. Well, we got all that working. Super mega bonus credit. So let's do a commit on that. Now, one thing we didn't do was do the style sheet for other articles, so let's do that real quick. So we're going to pull the stuff for that out of the main content, which actually ends up being everything that's still in here. So this is now empty. Which is fine. So sometimes you'll find that as you're doing React components, sometimes things just end up being containers, and like they don't really have any markup of their own. So if you look at main content now, it's really just rendering 3 other components. So it doesn't really have its own styles, which is totally fine. We can just get rid of this. And then we just need to import our style sheet into here. You know, normally the morning class is sleepy. I don't know what you guys ate for lunch, but maybe I'm really boring. I don't know. Oh, what did we break? Oh, right. Who wants to read this error message? No such file or directory. And looks like it's main content CSS. That's the problem. Well, we just deleted it, but we didn't stop trying to import it. So we should probably do that. There we go. All right. Commit that real quick. All right, so the last thing we haven't componentized is this footer, which I'll just be honest, I'm not going to do for you. I think you get it by this point. Let's go on to more interesting things. Did anybody do the clicking to make a comment box show up? You did? Successfully? A couple people? Awesome. How did you do that? Just a high-level overview. Okay. Yeah, so you use state to keep track of what?
Like for the first credit, I just kept track of whether like buttons clicked or not. So like I had to toggle the comment and not.
Okay. Yeah, so you basically had some sort of property on state that kept track of whether it should show it, and then the button click changed it. Makes sense to me. So looking at the way we've got our markup set up, what component do you think that state should live in? So the comments are, so the button for the comments is here. And I would assume that the comment should probably just show up right below that if we click it. So what component do we think that state that keeps track of whether we should show it or not lives in? Thoughts? It's okay to guess. Which component did you put it in? Article. Makes sense to me, right? Because the links and the main article, and it seems like the comments probably relate to the article. I mean, they certainly don't relate to the ad, probably. So let's have that state live there. So how do let's go over to our article component. I'm going to close some of these so we don't have too many things open. Okay. How do I set up state in a component?